Hey guys, want to welcome you to another edition of that new Jack Swing podcast. I've got myself, we've got Stevie Street. Sheldon will be joining us later. How you doing, Stevie?
I'm very good, sir. Good to see you again. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been great. It over here it's Easter, so we do get a couple some time off just to relax and reflect and stuff. Um, but yeah, really excited, just about being able to celebrate all things New Jack and stuff.
I like your background this week.
Yeah, I was trying to catch the sort of the retro, sort of the retro type of stuff. As I said, it's actually it's really good that we can start to celebrate this music. And we had a number of things we want to talk about, and I guess being able to talk about Cal West is another way of reflecting and celebrating all things New Jack Swing. What was your take? I mean, what was your take on it?
Well,
On hearing Cal
I've
West?
noticed you've been uploading in parts on the Halftime Chat channel, haven't you? So what part are you up to? Because I don't want to give any spoilers away.
No, it's finished. So yes. So because he came back twice. So we did the first one, and for about 2.5 hours, and he came back and again for an hour and a half, and Albie Shaw joined in. So yesterday was the last one where we reviewed the Sexy Versus album, and we decided, we'll catch up for a third time down the road.
I mean, there's 2 or 3 parts I really enjoyed about it. The actual breakdown of the albums, and you got really technical with the production. And he was talking about how they made all the demos and how the demos ended up, as like an 8-track album, and it was rushed from the initial Night and Day single. I just didn't know that. It made like 15 tracks. 8 got put out. Maybe some of the others ended up on the second album, but I'm sure there's a few that never made the cut. I do know, and I don't want to give too much away, there is a whole bunch of them demos. There is, there's like, of those 8 tracks, there's literally 5 or 6 different versions of them.
Are you serious?
That I can account for, yeah. That I know Cal West will probably be looking for one day. I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. I felt what he said about the second album was he felt it was rushed, but I thought the second album was fantastic. I really enjoyed the second album. It was split again into up tempos and ballads, which is how I like my New Jack Swing albums. So, and then the other parts that I enjoyed, the question you asked about Cheyenne, I've waited too long, which is, the real hardcore New Jack swing fans know about that 12-inch. It's one of the greatest extended 12 inches of all time. That, and you're going back to 1988 there.
Yeah.
The whole New Jack was blowing up. That kind of got forgotten. It was really a club track. But if you've not heard, if you're a New Jack fan, do search out Cheyenne. I've waited too long, because what you hear in that production and the vocal techniques and the way the way they're strumming the vocals and they're cutting inside the beats, it's an incredible mix. And thirdly was when, it's something that the New Jackers have always been, we've always thought about it. It's the holy grail we've all wanted to get our hands on, and that's the Key West album. There was only 2 tracks released. 1 track on an Uptown Future compilation.
Wow.
Tomorrow Is Too Late. That's the first time we ever heard of him. That's on a UK like LP CD compilation on MCA Records. Very fast up tempo track. And secondly, they released a cover version. Hello, I Love You. It was like there's only me and I know one other person who's got this 12-inch. Shout to VJ NGS3. We've never seen the record since. I don't know why. It did get released, but I just don't understand what happened to it. Here's Mr. Sheldon in the building.
Hey, how you doing? Hello.
Yes, Sheldon.
Better late than never.
Yeah.
How's your week been, sir?
I've been good. Been pretty well. Been pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, we were just just reflecting on the Cal West interview, just to see, just to get your thoughts, if you know, or if there was anything from the interview that, because all of it has been released now. If there was anything from the interview that really stood out for you.
The thing that resonated with me with the interview is his when he was sharing the information about the difference in production. One of the things that he said was kind of consistent with a lot of new producers. There's a difference between what he was doing and versus what Eddie F was doing. Kyle West came from that classical, traditional musical training. So obviously, with the new producers coming on board at that time in the late '80s, they knew the equipment. They weren't necessarily musically inclined or technically trained. So he kind of had to, he called it dumbing down, but he had to kind of minimize what he was doing, because that technical aspect of it, obviously, it was going to serve him well in terms of being able to compose. But in terms of making the type of music that was going to reach the audiences, as well as utilizing the equipment, he had to adapt. You know, that's almost similar with Missy Elliott's producer. The engineer's name is Jimmy Douglas. He engineered all of the Missy and Timbaland stuff, and he started out being an engineer in the 70s. And what he had to do is that going into the 90s, he was like maybe 40 something. He had to undo everything he knew to be able to adapt to engineer music the way contemporary music engineers. So, you know, Kyle West's commentary on that was very insightful.
Yeah.
His production was so melodic, and like you say, he was talking about the classical kind of elements he was adding to the playing of the production, which that gave it Kyle West his own unique style, really, which Sheldon was talking about there. You know, even with the ballads as well, not just the new Jack Swing tracks. Some of your favorite ballads, Nnamdi, that you like, had that orchestral feel to it in the background, which just drew you in, really, didn't it?
You know what? Listening to, I mean, he's such an unassuming guy, quiet, humble, but he also reminds me of Tammy Lucas. And when I talk about Tammy Lucas, is that you barely hear from them. They had such a big impact on New Jack Swing, but they're the least amount of people that you see doing interviews or anywhere. Because I didn't even know how Kyle West looked like until I saw him. And there's few pictures there. He's not on social media. The same way when interviewing Tammy Lucas, it's like, we've heard so much about you, but we've not really seen you, consistently. So, guys, if anyone hasn't watched it, be sure to look through. I think the one thing that was disappointing for me was the fact that we had some technical issues. So his camera kept shutting down and had to reload. So after maybe 5 minutes, it'll go off, and then it'll upload. And so
I'm just grateful we got his story,
Yeah, yeah. But what that means, it makes it hard to. It's going to take me 3.5 hours to actually edit the entire interview to put it out at once, because I can't just put out the whole interview with the dropping off and dropping on, because it's not fair on the guest. So I have to go through, when it drops off, cut it, then when it comes back on, put it back on. So that would happen over the next by next week or so, and so everyone can get to watch the full both interviews and stuff. But just before we move on, did you guys, I'll start off with you, Stevie. What's your favorite Kyle West song?
Song?
What that he produced?
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot there.
I mean, come on. Oh, Sheldon, can you, while Stevie's thinking, is there one that stops up out to?
Really, I think he produced a lot of records, but I think the I'll Be Sure album in totality, I couldn't really pick an individual song, but I think his work on that album was so critical because it was a totally different type of production. Like Stevie said, he utilized the technology at the time, but there was a lushness to those records that didn't exist in a lot of the other New Jack Swing records. It was just basically the drum machines and the samples, but you know how they went into that record, they produced it. Even though they used new technology, they used a technique, I guess, how people produce records in the past, and the records were very, very plush. You know, you heard the strings, you heard it was an emphasis on background vocals, and I think it holds up very well. So I think for me, that album alone would be the one. I think he really excels on the ballads, but really the entire album. I mean, it's big.
Okay.
Night and Day, I mean, you know, I know there was several people worked on that. I must just say, before we close the Al B. Shaw Carl West conversation, I must mention Roy Shamir, the guy who engineered and mixed the album. I spoke to him years ago.
Wow.
He had a huge part in that album to play. He doesn't get mentioned. But, you know, if he ever watches this video, Roy Shamir, big credit to him as well. Carl West, you know, he'll tell you about him definitely.
Yeah, he did mention him, but because you asked you asked the questions, and he gave some credit. But then, you know, we know a lot of Teddy's sort of engineers like Dave Way and you know, John Marie
Franklin and all those other guys.
Yeah, Franklin. Yeah. So this Samir guy, how come did he go on to do other things?
Who's that? Sorry.
Yeah, he engineered other music, and that's one of the things. Since you brought the engineer component up, Stevie, is that when they did the Al B. Shore Unsung, they showed clips of Al B. Shore in the studio, like new footage, and he was working with Rowie. So when you look at all of that music at that time in the late 80s, when you start seeing young people come into the business and creating music, the engineer was so important because at that point, a lot of entertainers, a lot of artists or whatever, they didn't have the engineering. They didn't have the engineering skills. So you had to have someone in there now who not only was familiar with the equipment, but who understood sound. So like you said, he doesn't get a lot of credit, but there's a lot of those guys. Bob Brockman, he mastered a lot of those records from the 90s. It's a lot of those guys, man. But Rowie, definitely major impact. So it's not a stretch to see Al B working with him now.
Okay.
There is a story about Night and Day, a quick one that maybe you can ask Al B. Shaw in the future, that they'd made the production, the demo for the music, but they'd not got the song written. And apparently on the way to the studio, they went to a cafe and they were sat eating the breakfast, and he wrote the song on a napkin. I don't know. That's the rumor, the story I've heard about that record. Maybe you can put that to Al B in the future, you know.
Okay.
So he wrote a napkin in a cafe somewhere on the way to the studio.
Well, yeah, I mean, or maybe, what I'll try and do is invite Cal on this, so that we can all have a conversation with him, you know, in a couple of weeks, so that we can just pose some of these questions to him directly. Because I did tell him we're going to go live, and so he's prepared for that. Okay. So yeah, guys, if you haven't watched the Cal West interview, check it out. He's an amazing guy, and unsung hero and stuff. Next up, we wanted to talk about who's on tour. We wanted to be able to talk about who's on tour right now, and see if people are interested. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening, but you know, from our point of view, there is the Legacy tour, there is the Janet Jackson tour, there is the new Jodeci, SWV, Drew Hill, and then there's Babyface and Anita Baker. Now, I'll start off with you, Sheldon. With Stevie. If you know, because both Stevie and I unfortunately aren't in the US, so all this is just, you know, it just feels like
Oh, we're
you
missing
know,
out.
we're missing out on a lot of stuff. But if you had an opportunity, Stevie, because I'm sure Sheldon, you do have the opportunity, but we don't right now. So you've got um, the Jodeci SWV Drew Hill coming up with the summer. You got Janet and Ludacris, and you've got the Legacy tour with New Edition, Guy, Keith Sweat with Tank opening up. If you had an option to go to any of those ones, and then it's just Anita Baker and Babyface, and here's your ticket, front row. Which do you pick, Stevie?
You know what? Considering I'd really want to be at the Legacy tour, but I have seen Guy in the Prime, which I mentioned on the last podcast. I've never seen New Edition. I have seen SWV. I seen SWV in the Prime. They came to Manchester. It was SWV intro. Check that out with Kenny Green and Me to You. I don't know if you remember them guys. That was amazing. So I've seen SWV. I've seen Jodeci in the last 15 years. The Babyface and Anita Baker, that is pulling me because you'll never forget that, will you? Anita Baker live. You're not going to forget that I am Babyface. So it's either Legacy tour or Babyface and Anita Baker. You know?
Okay. What about yourself, Sheldon? I mean, you're in the States. You have the opportunity to see all this stuff. But if you had to prioritize of all these tours, which would you take?
Well, I'm kind of biased because I already have tickets, so I'm going to Baltimore to see the Legacy tour next weekend. But and I never saw any of these artists. I saw a New Edition many years ago in 1984. That was the very first concert I ever went to when they were kids. So, but I had never seen any of these folks because I was out of the country when they were doing all the tours or whatever. So I never saw them, but obviously the Legacy tour will be great because this is my first time seeing all of these groups that I always wanted to see in their prime. And then the next one, if I had to go to one after that, it would be the Anita Baker Babyface, because this is Anita Baker's. This is her final run. She's going to supposedly retire after this. So this is major. So I saw her maybe in New Orleans, maybe about 15, 20 years ago, but she was really good then. But I would love to see her this go around because she's going to retire. So, yeah.
Did you hear that snippet she put on Twitter of a new track that she recorded?
Yes.
I didn't hear the snippet. Who produced it? What was it? Did it, you know?
No idea. She just put it out there and just blew people's heads away. So there's obviously an album coming. She's obviously going to do this tour, then put an album out, and then that'll probably be the farewell, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And she's
I think it's what it is, because she had some issues before. She had issues before trying to get her publishing and all her stuff back.
Yeah,
that was the big thing. So she has spent a lot of time on the side past few years trying to get that publishing back in her masters and everything. So that's probably why she took so long to record a record. But
so she did boycott the music industry until she got her stuff back, and so she's got it back. That's why she's putting up new music, and she's supporting that with the tour.
Nnamdi, I see. Karen, what's going on with Karen White? I seen someone on IG before she's performing live. What's going on there? Busting the moves.
You know what? When I interviewed Karen, I didn't realize she had so much energy. Then I started to look back. You know, when you're doing these interviews, I have to do some research. So I look back at some of her performances. So when she sang "The Way You Love Me" on Arsenio, wearing high heels. And people talk about Beyonce. She was dancing with high heels and so energetic. And then, to see her now in a band rehearsal, really just getting all over. I'm like, wow, she has so much energy. And I did send her a message last night saying, man, if only you could come to the UK, because she loves to perform with a band. She doesn't. She actually, she doesn't do a lot of shows because she doesn't want to do backing tracks. She's aware that that's actually, most promoters can't pay for a band. But if she has to pick between a small venue with a band and a large venue with backing tracks, she'll go to the small venue with a band because she vibes off a band and live music and stuff. And you saw in the rehearsal how she just gets busy with the drummer and with everything. She's just amazing. And 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 there's some bias to me because she's a massive supporter of the channel. She's on there. She's commenting on any other interviews, and which is somewhat nervous when the people I interview come back on. But yeah, I would definitely would love to see Karen perform because she doesn't sing for the money. She just because she just has so much energy and she loves it. But so if I had to choose, because I didn't get to pick mine, if I didn't get to pick mine, I mean, as much I probably not Jodeci and SWV and Drew Hill. Not that I don't love them and stuff, but I probably would go New Edition Guy. Guys, Teddy is still my favorite producer artist. It was Teddy, Michael Jackson, and Steven Spielberg. So Teddy, watching him perform. So even though I know that there's talk about Aaron's voice and stuff, but just to see them out there and singing alongside them. Then New Edition, I saw them at the Home Again tour back in '97 when Blackstreet were opening up for them and 702. And I think Keith Sweat did some dates. It was the best concert of my life, just watching all 6 of them perform. Then there was BBD, Bobby Brown, Johnny Gill, and Ralph. Then they all came back. It was just mind-blowing. As much as Blackstreet would, they just come out with No Diggity and stuff. So to see them on tour to me would be awesome. And then it would probably be, and I think Anita Baker would be one of those emotional type of stuff, I think I've seen Babyface. He has taken if you ever see Bruno Mars perform, Babyface has taken that sort of vibe where he gets his band to come and join him on stage to sing, to dance, and do the Bruno. If you ever see Bruno Mars with his dancer, his band dancing with him, that's what Babyface has now started to do, and it looks good. But I think he has a lot to take from that. So yeah, so that's ours. So guys, watching, let us know if there's anyone on tour right now that you would love to see. We've got a question here, and I wanted to ask you guys. I'm going to put 2 questions that were just posed to me. I don't know if you can see this. Did Shalimar do New Jack Swing? And the other question here was, did Boy George do New Jack Swing? Stevie, I'll start with you on both of them.
Mind on a trip.
Yeah,
he worked. They worked with Teddy and Gene, and again, the story to that is they didn't get on too well with Teddy and Gene, Old Boy George. You weren't too happy in the studio recording those tracks with them. Don't Take My Mind on Trip, though. That's a really underrated track. That,
yeah,
I think it was Virgin won it 1989. Virgin, I've got the album somewhere.
Did it do well in the UK?
It got released. I just know that Boy George wants to forget about it, though. He never really talks about it.
Wow.
Well, I think as well.
Yeah,
he got paid. I think it was like, was it 70? That was it, 75 grand to do that. That's the story I heard. Did you hear anything else, Sheldon?
Yeah. I remember the time. What it was that Gene had a publishing deals was with Virgin. So that's how he got connected with Boy George. Gene's publishing company was with Virgin, and Virgin's urban music department, because they were trying to break Boy George because he had some personal issues, and they were trying to bring him back. And at that time, Teddy Riley was the hot producer, so they were going to go ahead and have Boy George work with Teddy. Now, it's the same situation with, like you said, with Kyle West and the Eddie F situation. Boy George came from a different time period in terms of how music was going on, and he was thinking it was going to be more collaborative process. But Teddy had already basically did the tracks, so it was basically you go in and you sing. And Boy George wasn't really happy about that, and he liked Teddy, but he didn't care for Gene, and he was like, Gene kind of just sucked the energy out of the room. So that's basically what he said. He sucked the energy out of the room, and he just didn't like Gene's personality and his whole thing. And Boy George literally called those tracks. He called them Bobby Brown Rejects. That's what tracks.
Wow.
He called the tracks Bobby Brown Rejects.
Yeah.
And obviously because he thought they were going to be kind of collaborating together. And those tracks, one of them Timmy Gatlin wrote. I think it was Whether They Like It or Not. Bernard Bell was part of that process. You Found Another Guy. So those were good records. But I remember that. I remember reading in Essence magazine, 1989. They paid Teddy $75,000. He flew a Concorde over to the UK.
Yeah, I heard
went
that
in the
one.
studio and did the tracks with Boy George. But it didn't really do that well in the States, even though I bought the records, but it didn't catch on the way Virgin wanted to. And if you listen, that album is called Hi Hat. So it's only like three songs that Teddy did, and then the rest of the stuff was the traditional stuff that Boy George did. And he talks about it in his book. And he went into full detail about the sessions or whatever. But like you said, Stevie, they didn't get on to it.
There is on YouTube.
Different
remember now. If you go on YouTube, there is a live performance of that single. He's performing it in a club at the time, back in the late 80s. It's still there somewhere. Don't take your mind on it.
Yeah, I saw him doing it.
Great question, by the way. Whoever asked that, great question.
Yeah, no, I did see. Actually, if you get to listen to Jack, I think Teddy talks about that as well. I think they paid. I know it was a lot of money. I think Teddy just got about 10,000. Gene probably got almost 80,000 or so. I can't wait for you guys to listen to Timmy Gatlin.
Well, we need to hear that interview.
Yeah, Timmy came out fighting, and he came out swinging against, Guy have received their masters, and so he goes into detail. So I don't want to spoil it to you guys. So it starts tomorrow.
To the listeners, you've got another interview with Timmy Gatlin. Is that what you're saying?
An hour, 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours with Timmy Gatlin. Wow. And he has been watching Halftime Chat, and he commented on interviews with Damon. He commented on the Legacy Tour, his thoughts on it. Goodness. There's one thing I'll share with everybody. Timmy Gatlin said that when he and Al Wilkie Stewart were doing BBD and all those things, he was thinking that Teddy wasn't living in a mansion and was a multimillionaire. That's what he did, because he just thought, look at all the music Teddy was doing that Teddy was dominating. He was shocked to find out that Teddy was still living in the projects. And he says at 21 that Timmy said he was a millionaire. So he said he was a millionaire, but he thought that Teddy was a multimillionaire. So yeah, so this is just to show that he just, and he's still grieving, and this is somebody who's still, after all this time, there's still some hurt around the whole thing. Even though he's talked about it and he's moved on, he's doing much better financially than all the others combined. But there's still that hurt and stuff. But he said he was a millionaire back in those days, and he thought Teddy was a multimillionaire. So that's. But as I said, I don't want to spoil the rest. As I said, I'll send. I don't want to spoil the rest for people who are going to be watching stuff. But anyway, so that was
Nnamdi. Someone had a question before the Boy George question. It was a Shalimar.
So they said that they asked if Shalimar did New Jack Swing.
Is it Circumstantial Evidence, the album? For one of the later Solar releases?
Yeah, that wasn't. Yeah, that wasn't New Jack Swing. What it was, that Circumstantial Evidence, that album came out. We're talking about the last record they did with the original ones was like 82, and then they kind of broke up, and then they went and got additional members. So they never made it to the New Jack Swing era. They kind of stopped around 85, but they kind of stopped short of that. So New Jack Swing's a couple of years after that, so they never made it that.
Well, that new lineup that they had did record like a New Jack flavored album. It's around 1989, 90. But obviously it didn't have Jodie in it, didn't have Howard Hewitt. It was, I think it had Jeffrey Daniel in it, I'm sure it did, and 2 new members. But again, the album bombed, it didn't do anything.
They had Mickey Free, Delisa Davis, and it was Howard Hewitt. So they stuck, and then they had a guy named Justin Davis who replaced like Jeffrey. So they kind of went to the end, and they kind of like, yeah, you can say they kind of had that flavor, but I think 87-ish was kind of like when they were actually done, because that whole distribution thing kind of like fell apart and Dick Griffey moved on. But right around at 87-ish, they were trying to change the sound.
It was the album after that. The album after that, Sheldon. I remember it. There was a couple of years after that. Was what it just did nothing.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one you're talking about. That's the one you're talking about where they got the new member, Justin Davis. That's the new one. Yeah.
See. I listened to that for a long time. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I just recently listened to Dougie Fresh on a podcast. He was with on QLS, and he was talking about the origin of the show, and he said that he gives Teddy credit, because he didn't do for programming the show, because he said he had the ideas and he went into Teddy's house because Teddy had all the equipment, and so he told Teddy, "This is what I wanted." He beatboxed and Teddy did the programming. But he says he told Teddy, "Yeah, I need to add more swing to it," and so he's taking credit for the word swing. I don't know. I'm not from New York. I'm not from New York. But tell me, in the mid '80s, was anyone ever saying swing when it came to music? No. I mean, unless you're talking about the ballroom dancing. And so when he says, I wanted more swing, I'm thinking, come on, man. Why are you trying to take Teddy's this?
Nobody, there was no swing. Even when Teddy was doing, like, show was 84, 85, and Teddy was doing a lot of rap songs that had that same sound, but they weren't calling it that.
Okay.
And nobody was calling it swing. You're talking about 88, Barry Michael Cooper. Now, that doesn't mean that, on the keyboard, where it has I think there's something on one of those keyboards that has that, but, it could be credence in what he's saying. But in terms of formally categorizing that music as some sort of New Jack swing or whatever, swing beater, that didn't exist around that time. That didn't come around until, again, in 88.
Now, I've recently interviewed Stanley Brown.
Oh, you've done that interview, have you?
Yeah, Stanley Brown. He was in the house when they're making the Guy album.
Wow.
He was. He said he and Aaron were in a choir together, so he knew Aaron from being a kid. So that's how Aaron hooked him up with Teddy. But he said that Teddy changed the game. I mean, he was there with Dr. Freeze and everybody. But he said when Teddy came out, that the whole everybody just stopped and they couldn't understand what was going on. So when you start to hear seasoned producers, Carl West saying the same thing, that's even Bryce Wilson from Groove Theory. When you hear these guys who are in the game and stuff saying about, look, man, when Teddy came out, as a kid, it just shook the whole industry. Then you start to think, it's everyone that tries to take credit for. Marley Marl was saying, I did New Jack Swing first with Heavy D. It was like, Teddy didn't come out and say, I'm doing New Jack Swing. He just produced music. By Michael Cooper says, man, this is music that, who was the person who was saying this? I think it was Bryce Wilson who said it. He says, before Teddy, we weren't listening to you could listen to R&B, but quietly, so the guys would do hip hop, but you couldn't play R&B in your car. They said when Teddy was dropping his stuff, it was like you could be cool to play R&B out your car and not feel like, and not be ashamed of it. That was the street music. So when Barry Michael Cooper says that's New Jack Swing, it was just he was crediting Teddy for what he was doing. So for everyone else to say, yeah, we invented New Jack Swing and stuff, I was thinking, no, it's Teddy didn't look at what you were doing and just try and copy it. He was doing his stuff, and they gave it a name, and it was different from what everyone else was saying. Even Babyface admitted. He said, "Look, when we heard I Wanna, we just said, man, what the hell was that?" And he was panicking. He said, "We've got to change the whole game." So, I get upset when I hear everyone saying, "Oh yes, Jam and Lewis were doing New Jackson first, and Full Force were doing." And it's like, everyone was producing this stuff. Teddy's stuff made such an impact that they gave it a name, and they credited him for changing how the community received music. And so I don't know why they think they can just try and rewrite history and take that credit.
The play devil's advocate, those people who you named, Full Force, what they were doing, they were making records with the big super drum beats, the way rap records were made. They were like this song. It was a song called Big Beat that all the rappers used. They were doing that, and they would have the stabs that people would scratch and the different sounds or whatever. So they were making stripped down records that they were singing over. It was almost the equivalent of what hip hop soul would be. They're singing over the like break beats. Their production was kind of like that. And of course, Jam and Lewis said, well, we did what we did in '86 with Nasty, but we only did it on one record, and then we moved on to a different type of sound. So everyone, I won't say they take credit, but when you're looking at what Teddy did, the difference between what Teddy did and what the rest of them did, yeah, they produced songs using that sound with the equipment that was out, like the Yamaha DX7 and the 808 drums and all of those different type of things. But what Teddy did that they didn't have is Teddy had the rhythm. Teddy had the rhythms that he used that didn't exist in any other records that was out there. And then vocally, the way the records were produced and arranged vocally, and then you throw them rapping in the middle of the record, and then a unique sample. So he's producing it like it's a rap record, but it's R&B mixed in it the way no one else had done it before. And here's the thing is that when Teddy was doing those records, his price was so high that if somebody wanted that New Jack sound, they couldn't afford Teddy. They was going to get somebody like a Full Force. They was going to get somebody else because Teddy was defined the sound and everybody else just kind of jumped. I won't say they jumped on board, but they had a variation of it. Now, as far as Marley Marl's record, Mr. Big Stuff with Heavy D. Well, that's more of the way rap records were produced back then. It had the James Brown, it had the samples or whatever that is. But no, Teddy is the main guy with all of that. I give all those guys acknowledgement for what they did, but Teddy is the centerpiece of that.
Yeah.
I think you're slightly obsessed with Teddy Riley and Nnamdi.
I would say that my music has always been about Teddy. And,
it's funny you mentioned Stanley Brown because you just slipped that one out there. Just, I interviewed Stanley Brown last week, that guy produced one of the greatest New Jack Swing records of all time.
Dreaming?
There you go.
Yeah, no, we talked about the making of Dreaming. I
compile like the greatest New Jack Swing top 10. I know it's all opinions and whatever. Where would you put Christopher Williams' I'm Dreaming? It's got, for a start, it's got one of the greatest vocal intros to a New Jack Swing record I have ever heard. The way he sings at the beginning before the beat drops in. Incredible.
Yeah. It's about 10 or 15 records that you can put in that category, Steve. Like you said, I'm Dreaming is one of them because when you look at that sound, it was like what Teddy was doing. And then when you saw what Dr. Freeze and all those other guys were doing, they were doing a variation of it, but it was a much faster tempo. Obviously, it's reflective of the dances. But when you look at I'm Dreaming as a song, yeah, that's one of the greatest ones. And it's a step up from I Talk to Myself. I Talk to Myself was a great introduction, but it was in the vein of that Bobby Brown, My Prerogative. But when he came out with I'm Dreaming, That was it. That
Yeah.
was
But
it.
just the vocal performance alone was just outstanding. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. He said that. Um, Timmy, I asked Timmy, it wasn't Talk to Myself almost a copy of my program? He said, yeah,
That
because
was
we
on
came up with
purpose.
the same. He said,
That was
yeah,
on purpose.
you know,
That was on
because
purpose.
what he was saying is that Teddy had the my prerogative beat, and he was about to write towards it, but when the fallout happened, he had the beat, and then he couldn't. He needed somebody else to write to it, so that's when he got Aaron and who else? I think Bob and stuff who wrote. But Timmy normally would write to it as it came out. So he said, well, I already had an idea for the track, so that's why he took it to Christopher Williams. But Stanley said the same thing, that, look, man, when you couldn't afford Teddy, you came to us or Freeze. Just because it was, but they were all in the studio with him and supporting him, and because that was his first record that he produced on his own.
If you look at
Dreaming was his first record.
Since you're talking about Timmy, when you look at that record, My Business, on the Guy album, lyrically, conceptually, that's like almost like in the vein of the My Prerogative situation. So you see the kinship between those records lyrically. So yeah, it's not a stretch.
Yeah.
Not a stretch.
There was a screenshot you sent me early in the week of a post by Mike C from Z Luke. Just remind me of that post again. And where was it from? Because I can't find it.
Oh, which one was it about? The R&B?
It's about the Jamaica Boys again. I just wanted to mention that track, Jamaica Boys, Shake It Up, because he had something to do.
Oh yes. Oh, who is? Yeah, because I don't know him, but he was saying that he did a remix on the track on the Jamaica Boys. Is it Mike C?
Mike C from the group Z Luke, which again, them guys just, Sheldon, do you remember Z Luke?
I don't remember him, but I remember the Shake It Up record that the J Boys did. I remember that. I remember Z Luke though.
We need to at some point. We need to talk to Z Luke, get him on Halftime or whatever, and talk about again. They're a New Jack group. They did 2 great albums, but that Jamaica Boys record, Shake It Up, what a record that was! And I mean, what was it? Something about the post said the original version of it sounded nothing like the remix, which has got me intrigued as well. Maybe talking about the album. The album version was it? I'm sure it was different to the 12-inch version. I'll have to dig my album out again.
I've got a question here, and Stevie, you probably could be good to that. Do you know any good stuff that came from the UK or outside of the States from a New Jack point of view?
Off the top of my head, there was this group called, and I can't remember the producer's name. They're called Rhythm Within, and it was 3 guys from London, a couple of African guys, and they not only produced singles for themselves. They did a compilation album of a whole bunch of other UK artists. There was probably one of the original girl groups as well, just before Eternal, called Serenade. Again, they released a few singles, a few compilation tracks. They had a whole production style, and a lot of their production style actually borrowed loops from Teddy Riley tracks and other producers. I remember you listen to the record. Oh, I reckon I've heard that loop before, and I've heard this record. But it was well made UK New Jack Swing. I mean, we should do maybe one day a podcast on UK New Jack Swing, and I'll research it properly and dig out a load of stuff to talk about. But they're one of them. Rhythm Within. Look up them guys. MC Juice. That's another guy, a rapper on a label called Production House. Check them guys out. Brian Powell, one solo album for Talking Loud record. Again, if you've not heard the Brian Powell album, go and search for that. But again, we can do a whole podcast on that one day.
I think it's hard to think, because when you think about it, so Teddy's creating records from the streets, from Harlem. And so it's like, trying to make a reggae album when you're not really from the Caribbean. You can make it, but it's, the vibe of Jamaica and the Caribbeans and what they're thinking and singing about, or doing Afro beats. If you're coming from India, you can you can program it and do it, but it's not the same feel. So the UK had soul, beautiful soul music, had this garage and house and stuff. But I think when you talk about New Jack Swing, it wouldn't be authentic to me if it didn't have its roots. It's like West yeah. So it's like West Coast hip hop was completely different from New York. So if I was out in London doing a sort of West Coast hip hop, it just would be like, well, the vibe isn't there. So I don't know outside of the UK, outside the UK, if any other maybe Canada, if they just did it, but if it was as authentic as the New York type of New Jack, I don't know.
Maybe one day we'll do like we'll do a podcast on UK and other countries that did New Jack Swing, but there's loads. Sheldon, I'm just thinking, when you was growing up in the local areas you was in, because there was always like New Jack Swing released on independent labels, in that area that sometimes got imported into the UK. I remember this record they were from Dallas, Texas. Do you remember the Wooten Brothers or the Wooten Boys?
Yeah, the Wooten Brothers. As a matter of fact, those guys also were part of Keith Sweat's Make You Sweat.
See,
Bobby Wooten.
I'm just thinking, in the areas that you grew up, did you ever see any record? Did you ever pick up any like independent release, local pressings of anything?
Well, at this point right now, when New Jack Swing was out, the records they were all like major labels. It wasn't like a lot of independent labels. It was pretty much at that point. Now, young people being in the music business, it started to become pretty common, and they were signing people up. So there's a window when people are being signed and they're trying to reach out to Teddy, and then they can't get them, and everybody is doing their variation. So when you talk about what's going on like in the UK, it's almost the same thing in the States, because you've got like there's Aaron and there's Bub and there's a couple other singers, but then you got other guys who are coming out with these groups and they're singing like Aaron, and then there's the whole production that's kind of similar to what Teddy. So what it is, it's just a style that people are taking and they're running with it. So, and at the time, like I was in the UK when New Jack Swing was super hot. Okay. And like you said, right before Eternal, a lot of people were really plugged into it. And it was just kind of like you had the equipment, and I wouldn't minimize it. I would say that they were doing what Teddy was doing. It was just the simple fact that Teddy had his signature sound. When you look in terms of the background singers and everybody else who was collaborating with him, and that kind of made the difference between what was going on in the States and the UK. But I will say, like you said, is that on the neo soul situation, the UK had that locked really before the States did, and they really had great singers and great musicians and whatnot. But I think that Teddy's situation, of course, we keep going back to him. He had a distinct sound that had different unique arrangements, that vocals that actually just kind of like stand out, that were consistent, that kind of epitomizes the New Jack Swing. But it's not totally isolated with him, but he's, like you all said, he's the centerpiece. Somebody posted a comment about, and I'm gonna let you go after this, about the Gap Band. Somebody did the Gap Band did a comeback album, and they made them go back in the studio because like you need to make a record like Teddy Riley. Now, mind you, they are almost the originators. Yeah. So they made them go back in the studio, was like, yo, you need to go ahead and make something else. So that's why when you listen to the Gap Band Round Trip album, they do a record called Jam. And, so that's how influential Teddy Riley is. Yeah.
It is funny because Timmy keeps saying we were modeled after the Gap Band, and he doesn't hide the fact that we were modeled after the Gap Band. So
imagine a whole Gap Band album produced by Teddy Riley. Imagine that. I always used to say that. Imagine if Teddy had done in 1992 done a Gap Band album. It had just blown all away with Aaron's voice.
He would have needed, but
background and that.
I think Timmy and Teddy, but their combination would have been a very different thing because Teddy did with other people, but when he with Timmy, I mean, if you listen to the Guy album, and just feel the production and the writing. It's a very different feel than say the Future album. So the two of them together had a very different style that I think together they could have done amazing, amazing stuff. Um, I do remember talking to Melvin Ryder Jr. Ready for the World to say, hey, how come you guys did
Yeah.
Straight Down to Business? All new. He says, man, they couldn't escape it, man. Lil Silas said, look, man, this is what's hot. You need a new Jack track, and he helped do the drum production on Straight Down to Business. It's amazing how one producer can just. I don't know which other producer you guys know.
Ready for the World made one of the greatest New Jack Swing records that never came out as a single. Yo, that's a lot of body. Why they never put that out as a single, I'll never know. Yo, that's a lot of body. Do you know that one?
I'm gonna tell you. I remember that. And it's funny, when you start talking about not putting it out. We look at it like Ready for the World. He made them put the record out. They had a record with My Girlie. And I'm telling you, it was when I heard it, and this is how powerful New Jack Swing is that when the record came out, it was like it erased Ready for the World's identity, because Ready for the World had that keyboard synth, the time, Prince sound. So all of a sudden you see them performing this record, but it's kind of like, and that's how you knew how powerful that music was, because everybody was doing a variation of that music. And what it did was it kind of like it erased their identity from who they were prior. But you had to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's as I said, people might would bang on me about Teddy. It's just that I don't know which other producer has had that kind of an effect on music that everyone says we need to copy this style. Even Timbaland and Pharrell. Does anyone jump on that type of music? And people go to them for the beats, but you don't see Rodney Jerkins trying to emulate their production. I don't know. All the producers that I've seen from the 90s, 80s, they all produce separately.
But Teddy is their blueprint, because prior to that, everybody is like much older. And at that point, producers weren't like looked at, especially on the R&B side with black music, they weren't looked at like they were in the forefront. Jam and Lewis was pretty much the ones that kind of like kicked that off. But prior to that, producers were behind the scenes. So you didn't know who they were. It wasn't really a big deal. But when Teddy came out, and again, you look at the age group, is that if young, mind you, think about Teddy's doing these records 18, 19, 20 years old. So everybody who's coming after him, they're 18, 15 years old, and he print. So now that's he's so into them. With him doing it, it makes it possible. I've seen guys really, when Teddy starts doing music, I've seen guys clear out their bedrooms, and now they buying equipment. And now they're making beats in the bedroom. You didn't see that. You're in the studio. Like Kyle West was saying, okay, we doing what we doing on demo, but you're in the studio. Teddy was doing the beats and stuff like that. Studio in his house doing R&B records. That was a light bulb that came on, and everybody kind of followed suit. That's why he's who he is.
Yeah. Anyway, just before we move on, because
on this day, bit of trivia for you guys. On this day, Jody Watley posted earlier to say that Friends in 1989 with Rakim was released on this day. It might have been yesterday or today anyway. But again, that record, she changed the sound on a second solo album. That hip.
But you know who's doing that record though, right?
Tell me, Sheldon.
You know who's doing that record, right?
No.
Andre Simone. He comes from the Prince camp, and he produced the first album and the second album. So he's doing it, and that just shows you how, again, powerful New Jack Swing is, that he can adapt to the sound. So you're hearing more of the harder beats, the swing, and everything else. And I mean, you already know, Stevie, is that when Jody was doing that record, they wanted Will Smith to be on the record, not Rakim. And
that.
again,
I know that actually.
Rakim MCA record. He just signed it, and Jody was on MCA, and it just attended to Jody's ears. So even though Jody is like 10, 11 years older than a Rakim, she's from a different era. She's picking up on the music, picking up on the rap vibe. And when she got Rakim to do the record, and it was dope because if you go back to Rakim's lyrics, it's almost like an extension of what he was about on his Paid in Full album. He's making lyrical references to the album, the Paid in Full album, which was still going at a particular time. So yeah, Friends was a powerful record. That second album, I love the second album, Larger Than Life. I love that better than the first one. But Friends, dope.
It was big in Nigeria, and so that's when I tell the guests that, look, if I heard your track in Nigeria, I mean, it left the US, it went to the UK, and then it came to Nigeria. So we were getting our music from the UK. So Friends was massive, and I think a lot of us were just like, oh, that's the guy from Paid in Full, because Paid in Full was massive. Everybody was trying to do the rap. So to have him again on Friends, that was for us in Nigeria. Paid in Full, then seen him on Friends. We didn't know any of the other stuff like Rakim for President, all that stuff. Didn't really make it across. So his collaboration with Jody was a massive global hit and stuff. Okay,
that video played on MTV like crazy.
My goodness. It's had so much. I mean, people. It's great when people are dropping some of these things. I don't know the funk band Sky, but it's great that we're getting people commenting and stuff and joining in and stuff.
Let's leave the listeners, the viewers wanting more.
Yeah.
Having a good role, but let's leave them. I have got a little list of new things that are out that you should check out.
Okay, yeah.
I'll get in before we do that, though.
Yeah, go through. Let's explore what's out. So, especially so we can just talk a little bit about that before.
I'll quickly go through it. The Girls album, debut album, 1988 on CD, has been going for about $100 to $200 for the last 30 years. You can now get it on a Japanese reissued CD for around $15, $20. So there's a nice new Japanese CD reissue of it now on eBay. Grab it while you can. It's a limited edition. There is a reissue of one of your favorite albums, Nnamdi, Christopher Williams' Changes. Again, in Japan CD. It's got 2 bonus tracks. They are remixes, though. And I think we've all heard the remixes before. There's a reissue, first time on digital of, I don't know if you remember, a singer called Letitia. She was signed to Motown for one album. Before she recorded that album for Motown and worked with Gene Griffin and Basic Black, she released an album in 89 on an independent label, working with a producer called Dealer Vance. We need to talk about that guy one day. Okay. And that album's now available on all digital stores. So the original Letitia album, Move On You, it's called. Check it out. It's amazing. As far as, Jam and Lewis have just released a movie score. There's 20, what did I write in my notes? There's about 25 tracks on it. They're all about a minute long. The score is called Unprisoned. And there's a track on there that sounds like Alexander O'Neill and Sherelle from about 1985. And they also talk about they've been hanging out with New Edition, with Caesar, or Scissor, however you pronounce the name, and Charlie Pugh. So expect some production from them.
Wow.
There's also an album out by the Walls Group, who are a gospel group. They've done a track with Teddy Riley. Which is Jack Swing.
Warren Campbell is part of that. There's
a version of Human Nature, Michael Jackson on there. Walls Group. If you want some new Jack Swing, check that out. There's a Nigerian producer called Black Jersey. He's released an album called The Lost Files, and there's a New Jack track on there. It's like a fusion of New Jack and Afro beats featuring Tiwa Savage called Fan. Check that out. What else I wrote down here? That's it. There's a Ukrainian producer.
Ukrainian?
Yeah. He's out in, I don't know if he's at, he's probably got a studio out in Ukraine. I hope it's bunkered in from the war. The album is through Rhythm and Stealth, the label, and the album's called New Jack Swing, and there's a load of vocalists on it, male and female, doing all sorts of stuff. Again, you can stream that, and that's it.
Don't forget Basic Black.
Yeah, Basic Black, of course, back in the day, their new album. We're still playing that on the radio show as well. And the Tevin Campbell. Don't miss the Tevin Campbell TV1 interview, which is on YouTube as well at the moment.
Yes, I did that.
Obviously, there's some very controversial topics, which it doesn't go too much into that, which I'm glad just concentrates on the music, working with Quincy and Prince. So that's unmissable. You know, watch that.
Yeah, I did watch that. Yeah, so guys, it's definitely been great. I mean, I know that you know what we're going to be doing here. Sheldon is going to the Legacy Tour next week, and so we will come back afterwards to review the tour from first-hand experience, because we've got different people giving us different feedback around the tour and stuff. So it'd be great to, when you go and give us an honest review.
We'll get the popcorn for that in.
He will get the popcorn for that. So you know so if you notice that a number of our favorite albums that were released between the mid '80s and early '90s have been reissued or been added onto streaming. Even the Good Girls, their whole stuff, you know, catalog, which Motown had just abandoned. It was just like, you know, people didn't bother. Now they've re-released it and everything. It's because there seems to be a new law that after 30 years, the artists are able to receive their masters. So what the labels are quickly doing is repackaging it and putting it out there to milk as much as they can. And then the artist now takes back the masters, so that anything that's been released after that day reverse to the owners. So like Guy now, Timmy talks about it, and as I said, you guys will listen to it extensively about Guy owning their masters from the Guy album and the Future album, and it means that any music from that album, they own it. I won't spoil who owns, or who are the people that own it, you know, because you know there are technically 5 different people who would say they're part of Guy, and so Timmy explains to you know, some of the pluses and negatives towards that side. I says I don't want to spoil that, but so don't be surprised with why some of these albums are being reissued right now, and they're adding all the remixes and stuff, just because the labels are trying to take advantage of it before they have to give it back to the.
It's cool. It'd be good content for our podcast anyway to keep coming out.
Yes. But yeah, just finally, you know, I've always proclaimed my admiration for Teddy. I think I would always put him number 1, then everyone else number 2. Maybe I put Jammin' Loose at 2, and the question I had for both of you, because when I ask producers this, they get tongue-tied. Who would you say would be a better, Babyface or LA and Babyface? Because you know there are 2 different times. There was post after there was when Babyface went on his own and did Exhale and I'll Make Love to You and all that stuff.
I've got an answer for that one already. I've got an answer for that one already.
Go ahead, Stevie.
But I'll let Sheldon go first.
Okay, Sheldon.
Yeah, if you look at that, you know, their arrangement is like a lot of other producers, is that there's a collaboration that I'll just say there's a collaboration that exists between them and their different roles, you know, and I'll just leave it at that, is the creative and the business aspect of it, and it works. It worked for that particular time, but we kind of know in the end who was really doing what. I'll just say that. But again, you got to have one to be able to, you can be creative, but you got to have somebody doing the business so that you can be creative. Not saying that one wasn't creative, just as creative as the other, but we know, we kind of know what the situation is,
Yeah,
So
but think about it though, because Daryl Simmons said the one thing that was unique about LA was the drums, the ribbons. And if you think of an LA babyface, the drum programming really started off their track. Before you'd hear the lyrics and the backing vocals, which was always Daryl Simmons and Babyface, and sometimes some of the artists. But the drumming, with "Don't Be Cruel," and "Roses Are Red," the whispers, Rosika Rendezvous. You're always you'd always hear the beat. So that was LA, because when LA left, Babyface just did ballads. It was.
Well, there's your answer. There's your answer.
But see, there you go. See,
LA and Babyface on the up tempo swing tracks. You pick them all day, and then you'd pick Babyface with the ballads. That's it.
And see, LA was remember though, LA they were in a band, The Deal, and LA was the drummer. So that's basically what that was. And like you said, Babyface kind of just moved into the ballad territory. And so we kind of know what the outcome is. But I'll just say this, is that when you look at writing and production teams, everyone is going to go ahead and have a role and what makes them unique together. So when you look at Timmy and Teddy is not a lyric guy. He's the music guy. He might have a conceptual idea, but Timmy was the lyric guy. So when you look at Teddy moving on, it was Tammy Lucas, it was Bernard Bell. So, when you start looking at that, it's easy to kind of separate them because we know who did what, just like what you all said as far as the drums and the writing and the melodies and things of that nature. So they were unique for the time that they were doing what they did. And obviously it's a natural thing. Babyface's strength, obviously, is the songwriting on the ballad side,
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, as I said, it's because I do ask producers and they say, they mention Babyface, and I say, is it LA and Babyface or just Babyface? And they get stuck like, wow, it's because there's two different eras of Babyface. And I think they just and I said, Babyface was different with LA, because LA, took him, they did Superwoman, they did slow tracks with together, but Fair Weather Friend and stuff, they did mid-tempos, but yeah. So anyway, Stevie, what was your thought? You would have just gonna,
like I say, with the LA, as far as the new Jack up tempo tracks, it would be them all day together.
Yeah.
Where's Baby, and then you've got, if it was picking ballads, it's Babyface all day.
Yeah. But anyway, it's been a great show, guys. Hopefully, the fans, those who tune in, enjoyed it, and
I've enjoyed it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, Sheldon.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. As I said, just being able to talk music and celebrate. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing Sheldon's recap of the Legacy tour. As I said, it's one thing for me to see clips on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. It's another thing to hear somebody just go in and break down the entire set and stuff. So that would be fun. And just remember that I've reached out to Carlos from The Deal, so I'm hoping that they can try. His people are trying to help me work on trying to get him, because I just want to understand their backstory, because Daryl Simmons gave me his story about supporting The Deal and stuff, but trying to get somebody like Carlos who was in it and seeing how Babyface took over and they moved on, and how it might have impacted them, just like, oh, these guys have come in and disappeared and broken up the band and stuff. So it'll be interesting to listen to that. So, but anyway, guys, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. It does help when we do have you guys watching and commenting. Myself, Sheldon and Stevie. We definitely appreciate the opportunity just to talk music and just have fun and stuff. As I said, our next episode would be Sheldon reviewing the Legacy Tour. Any one of you who've actually been to the Legacy Tour, it'll be great to hear your what your thoughts are, and then we'll have some other things that we'll talk about as well. But yeah, for myself, I'll say goodbye. Stevie,
Have a great week, guys, and again to the viewers. Till next time, see ya.
yeah.
Have a great week. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to the listeners, and we'll touch back.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Take care.